Good evening. I'd like to call the March 11th, 2024 Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission meeting to order. Participating remotely is Colin Coyle. Not present are members Adrian Costell and Tajender Gill. All other members are present, which means two of us. So first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from February 12th. Is there a motion?
Make the motion.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Any comments, corrections with regard to the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes 3-0. Next item on our agenda is the Timco Noise subdivision, and the applicant is present before us. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, board. My name is Russ Sacco. I represent the applicants, Carol Timco and Teresa Cleary. And I have with me Sam Costanzo, who is the engineer on the project. Jim, did you circulate the latest response to the revised letter? I brought extra copies.
I did not.
Okay.
Thank you.
So by way of some background, Carol, my clients, Carol and Teresa, they're sisters, and they received this property from their father. The property in question is an approximate 4-acre parcel at Sandy Run Road and Edgewood Road. My clients are looking to subdivide this parcel into 2 lots, one for each of them. So the parcel itself is a little over 4 acres. They're looking to subdivide into 2 lots, each about 2.1 acres, give or take. You'll see on the plans that there are 2 houses proposed on the lots. However, they're only conceptual in nature. My clients don't really have any intentions of building immediately, and they may hold it, they may sell it. They just have no plans that specific into the future. So I have Sam here to go over the plan and I guess address the March 7th review letter. Sam put together a response to that letter, and his responses, I was going to tell you they're in red, but I realized I printed it out on my black and white printer. So they are a different font, but they are in response to the letter. You'll see them under each item. So with that, we can kind of go through the letter.
Before you proceed, Jim, is it possible for you to email that to Colin, since he's not got a copy of it?
I already did. Hopefully, he has his email available and is able to read it. And I also sent it to Paul.
Okay, terrific. Thanks.
I have it. Thank you very much.
I'm opening it now. Thank you.
You have the benefit of it being in color.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. So, Sam, if you could, for the board, now you do show 2 houses on the plan. Is there a reason that you did that so that we could kind of jump through some of the issues or to the issues?
As long as the board is familiar with the site, which is just right down the road from here, which I trust you are. Yes, we did provide in concept on page 2, 2 homes, driveway locations, just to show that because this site has natural resources on it, it would be prudent to demonstrate that there are buildable areas on each of these 2 lots after they're subdivided. So that was the purpose of doing a concept to help the township understand that these lots are buildable upon. So, but the sites do contain waters of the Commonwealth, which were flagged, wetlands, steep slopes, woodlands, trees in the form of woodlands meeting that definition. So there wasn't an area on the site that's not encumbered by some resource. So it was important to delineate those and then show an area of clearing for both homes. Quite frankly, the homes, as Russ said, these two sisters have intentions that are different from each other. They may not come in with a plan for a home on this for 1, 2, 5, or 10 years. It's just to keep them apart, let them both have their half of the ground, and then the township will be comforted knowing that these lots can be built upon when an applicant comes in for a building permit application. And at that time, will they go through more detail of depicting the size of the home, because these are theoretical. It could be a different shaped home, different roof line, and location on the site. So that's the nature of why this is in concept.
And if we address the March 7th review letter, we do have a lot of already complied or will complies. I can address those in the beginning. Is that
Yep.
the preference? Okay,
Please do so.
absolutely. So in reference to the March 7th Remington Vernick letter, the already complied or will complies are numbers 1 through 7, 10 through 16, 19 through 26, number 29, and 31 through 34. And if the board is okay, then I could address the first item that I didn't
ahead.
delineate. Number 8, Sam, number 8 references the site capacity calculations for woodland protection, or the woodland calculations. You did provide a response to that. Could you just briefly?
Yeah, there was a number of comments relative to the site capacity calculations that don't really require any change. All that it is that when you do site capacity calcs, you first deduct the areas that have highest resource value. So if you have wetlands that are 100% protected and their watercourse buffers are 100% protected, you subtract that land out initially. But when you come down to doing, that area can also be encumbered with woods, which is the case here. So when you then do natural resource protection to demonstrate that you're meeting the standard, you do count all the woods on the site, even though they're in the 100% resource. So that's really just all the misunderstanding is that in site capacity, you start with deducting ultimate right-of-ways, easements that exist on the property, and then you start with your highest resource value and work your way down, and you're left with a net buildable site area. That's for the purposes of density. Then when you go to resource protection standards, you need to show how you meet each individual resource, woodlands, and so forth, of demonstrating compliance.
In terms of the plan has been revised, are we showing that, or is there any need to revise the plan?
There was no need to revise the plan. There was an area that we helped to clarify. The site capacity calcs technically don't have a listing for waters. They have wetlands, and then for some reason, the book has wetlands and watercourse buffers. So we decided to put the waters in the watercourse buffer area, which was 100% protected. We simply moved it now into the wetland category, and there's no change. It's just moving things around.
And that would address number 9 as well.
Yes.
Paul, do you have any thoughts on 8 and 9 and the applicant's revised response?
Obviously, so just receiving that now and trying to see what the discrepancy is on our comments. So I think that's potentially something I'll have to go discuss with the reviewer. I'm reviewing the plan now. And so we noted discrepancies. So that's something I'm going to have to investigate further to be able to comment on that.
Thanks. If you could proceed.
It seems like there was just a kind of disconnect between the two sheets. So I'm trying to determine that right now. But again, be happy to discuss it with the designer and work it out. If if it's correct, then fine. But we flagged it, so it's just something to make sure normally that the sheet 1 and sheet 2 are coordinating.
I believe it's just a minor technical item, as Paul said, that just needs to be reconciled between the two engineers to make sure everything is copacetic.
Thank you. So number 17, I mean, 17 and 18, similar issue. 17 addresses the request for conceptual erosion and sediment controls. Is that something that you suggested earlier that we could hopefully defer to the building permit?
I do make that suggestion, but to make it more clear for the reviewer, I decided to just simply show more woodland clearing to the maximum limits to show how wide open it is for anyone to meet stormwater management requirements. I didn't want to choose in my hypothetical or concept version of grading out 2 homes on the lot. I didn't want to max out all the woodland clearing, but it's, again, it's concept and it makes it more clear for the reviewer. I did so in the response, and I already updated the plan to show that.
And if I could just make a comment, so I'm seeing the plan that's being presented. I'm looking at the plans that were submitted that we reviewed and are part of our letter. So I have a Rev 1 dated 2/13/24, and obviously it's drastically different than what is shown. So just to confirm, this is a new plan that was not submitted to Remington Vernon, correct?
That's correct. We got your letter woke up to it on Friday morning, so we just responded quickly
Sure.
to it today.
Obviously, just making mention that obviously this is a new plan, and so I'm viewing it right now live. So just want to make that mention, and that's fine. But just obviously something that we'll have to review, of course, as part of the process.
And it sounds like that's actually a will comply now, since you're going to be showing.
Well, we're not showing the erosion control devices and designing all the erosion control. We just made it more open. The erosion control, the stormwater management, all will come into play with the building permit stage.
And I agree. And just to chime in, so the plans that were submitted that we reviewed, I commented on that just because the wood line was literally right up to the seepage beds. So when you go to the next phase or however you want to work, start with ENS, work backwards, whatever works for you. I just noticed that to provide area for the silt sock and then LOD beyond that, you just want some sort of offset. So I appreciate that. Looks like you have, great clearance. It was just to demonstrate that there will be more woods cleared, and then your site capacity and natural resources would have to be adjusted. So looks as if that's been taken care of. Quick question. The site capacity previously was at, on sheet 1, 2.05 units permitted site area. Can you let us know what the updated site capacity calc yields?
Nothing ever changes with the site capacity. If you disturb more, site capacity stays still with the extent of resources, and you deduct through them, so you still end up with 2.05. Your resource disturbances don't alter your site capacity calcs.
You're just more maxing out what is the allowable disturbance, correct? Under this plan?
Relative to natural resource protection standards, yes.
Thank you.
With woodlands. And like I said, I just did that to make it more clear. An applicant coming in with a building permit could in fact come in with less and be more, because he might have a smaller house, different location for the house, different driveway configuration, but I'm pretty sure he'll have to meet our driveway locations because they're the optimum spots for site distance. So there won't be a change there.
So what is the resource protection land for woodlands now? Because it was previously 2.062. And there was a lot more woods being preserved.
On the resource protection, we show them on each individual lot.
So this is on sheet 1, where you get your sum of 2.709 resource protection land site capacity calcs. I just see a 2.062 was the resource protected on this previous plan. The area acres and of the resource were 2.749. So it looks like you're clearing a good amount more woods. Just
The difference you're finding is like, for example, when you have an easement running through like we do, a sanitary sewer easement, those woods get knocked out right away just in the first step. So you don't knock them out again. And that's why I gave you a pretty detailed response how that is, and we can go over that over the phone, but
not just got the response, but like I said, it looks like I'm looking, and I guess, I don't know, Jim, if you have the previous plan, if you can display that, or I can potentially, I'm not sure I can see. It looks like I'm kind of locked out here.
Can I
just-
ask a question, Paul, before you go
Sure.
further? Because
Yeah.
it sounds to me, your review letter was based on a prior plan, and there's
That's
now a new plan that's been submitted. And there's
Correct.
issues as to whether or not the new plan that's been submitted complies with what you were requiring. Is it fair to say that with respect to these items where there is a difference, that if the board were inclined to recommend approval, that it would be subject to the final review of the township engineer? Because what I'm hearing is what sounds like a difference in opinion for the calculations. And we don't have the benefit of all the plans in front of us.
Sure.
And it sounds like there might have to be further discussion between the two engineers directly.
Sounds good to me.
That's agreeable.
okay.
Question on the volume control estimate, which was, if that's is that the ratio that you just came up with, the 2 point, was 07 or 7? What was that number?
9,
Two
that's the-
point 2.05 was. the,
05.
Oh,
Now, and that meets the current ordinance exactly?
Well, that's the number of units permitted per site area,
Yep.
and we're proposing 2 lots, and that complies with the 2.05.
And what would the
Barbara,
threshold be for that, though?
and I guess just where I was going was I would just see this calc changing, and that's just a quick glance at this, but again, we can work it out with the designer. But that was with it.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, for jumping in there. Normally I'm quiet. Okay. If I could direct the engineer, when you review that, I'm going to send you something. I want you to take a look at that to review it in the context of potential stormwater management changes that the township may consider in the future, just so that you have an understanding of some stuff.
Sure.
Okay, to move to the next item. Thank you. Sam, number 18 addresses the infiltration testing at the site. Again, since these houses are conceptual in nature, is that something that you are hoping or recommending that be put off to the building permit phase?
Yes. Yes, we felt that certainly to do the testing, you're going to disturb woodlands to do the testing. And you're going to be testing in locations that may not even be utilized for someone 1, 2, 5, 10 years from now. They might be in a different location. So it's just needed to demonstrate that there was suitable area for stormwater management. And we gave a sizing of that based upon soil survey data of limiting zones. And we provided a response to that Russ handed to you with our new letter.
So I have another question. In light of the request that certain requirements under our subdivision and land development ordinance be deferred until the time of building permits, I don't think those building permit applications require some of these testing items.
Yeah, actually, Barbara,
We do.
It's actually reversed. Our ordinance doesn't require items 17 and 18 as part of a minor subdivision application.
Okay,
Although RVE pointed out that when you do go to build these houses, Paul was concerned that the clearing limits were a little bit tight for the erosion and sediment control that would be required at the building permit stage when you would have to do the stormwater design. And that's why he raised those in 718. So they're technically not a requirement of the ordinance for a minor subdivision. However, RVE wanted to point out that you better make sure that this is going to work so that you don't sell off a lot to someone who now is overly constrained because you didn't do some investigation. That's
Okay.
kind of where it is.
and what I was leading to is if these were things that were being deferred till the time of building permit, would it make sense to do some sort of declaration of restrictions that require these items to be completed at this time of submission of building permit before approval?
I was simply just going to make any of those type of things notes on the record plan. So when the record plan of subdivisions recorded, they would be bound to do that. But
Well, and I'm saying declaration of restrictions only because more likely than not, that will be picked up by a title clerk as opposed to specific notes on a final record plan, which tend to be omitted.
I agree. And then it would be recorded against both lots.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree that that would be easier to pick up. I don't think,
Is that something that you think your clients would agree to?
I believe they would. I mean, whether it's a note on the plan or it's a declaration, it's something they're agreeing to do and be bound by. So it's just memorializing that commitment.
And I do like
your
that idea
your
because it
standalone.
does- I do like that idea because it does put that out there for anyone potentially purchasing the lot.
And if I could just add one point too, obviously there's two different owners here, each looking to take a lot. So just to kind of make sure things work now, again, I'm looking back at the plan where everything was very tight. If the seepage bed is found that it doesn't infiltrate there, you'll have to move it. Then potentially your zoning calcs could be, not working down the line. And to avoid that with any sort of hiccup, maybe you would just need like a 1 foot change, like a shift in that lot line right now. Because if there's two different owners, usually then, doing a lot line change in the future wouldn't be potentially an agreeable item. So just to kind of help everyone where I was looking at it, well, now's the time to subdivide and shift and make sure things are going to work. And if your zoning is just off and if everything's not quite working, now's the time to get it to work and to a point where when you come back for the building permit, you won't be looking for any relief and then things will just work. And they're subdivided at that point. You don't have the ability to, and you could, but I just, sounds like a lot line change between two different owners would be difficult at that point. And that's what I was kind of getting at.
We'll make the applicants very aware of that issue.
And that's just for them to just to work better and to have their subdivision and they have their own lots and they're good to go.
We can address that with the applicants. Okay, jumping to 27. Is that okay? All right. So 27, Sam, is addressing the roadway shoulder. We're not obviously showing that on the plan, and is that going to be a waiver request?
If the board felt that that was a requirement by the code, we would be bringing that waiver request to the board, yes.
I did review past applications, and that has been a requirement, although typically it is waived depending on the situation. I think in this case, I don't know that we want to widen Sandy Run Road in this area and cut down more trees. And relocate utility poles and all that stuff.
Like I said, at this point, with it being a subdivision now, and once it's subdivided, Saldo doesn't apply because, one single building residential doesn't apply as account for a land development. So we were just looking to flag everything in the Saldo now that would apply, that wouldn't in the future.
And that's consistent with number 28, which is the sidewalks. The applicant is also going to be requesting a waiver from the installation of sidewalks.
I'd just like to note that I think, and I won't speak for the planning commission, but I particularly commented on that because I think Lower Makefield likes to have sidewalk, and I'll leave that to the commission and to the board, but I think that was the comment that we wanted to have.
Question then, if you're not going to construct sidewalks, are your clients willing to maybe pay a fee in lieu of construction?
Yes. I cite that in the response.
Okay.
That's typically how it may be addressed. So the board can look at it that way.
So, Jim, is there a sidewalk anywhere near that location?
No.
Okay.
Well, doesn't Edgewood have a bike path that goes through Sandy Run?
Yeah.
The bike path.
Edgewood has the bike path. When you go down Sandy Run, there's no sidewalk anywhere on the remainder of Sandy Run Road.
But these lots abut Edgewood, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That could be a good connection to the trail for these new homes. I think that would be good feature for selling, but I don't want to speak for the applicants, but again, it was a comment that we wanted to flag now because it wouldn't apply later.
Paul, if I can ask, so
Sure.
Saldo would require the building of the sidewalk as a condition of the subdivision normally?
So it's a requirement in the Saldo.
Yeah.
And again, once these are subdivided and you're coming in for single building permits, since it's residential, if you're doing a single, not residential building, it's two or more residential buildings, so Saldo wouldn't apply.
Right.
It could. It would take a long while to get to here.
Paul, any thoughts? Or John, excuse me, John, any thoughts about it?
You need the microphone.
Yeah, John, would you turn your mic on?
So the issue with the sidewalk would be different if it subdivided?
Yeah, I'm still not hearing John.
Oh,
I can't hear it either.
Look at.
Now it's really green.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. No, the requirement on the sidewalk would be different if it wasn't subdivided versus being subdivided? Or no?
Well, one of the requirements is that all subdivisions must provide sidewalk. And so they either need to provide the sidewalk. If the planning commission feels that a sidewalk in this location would be appropriate, you could certainly make that recommendation. If you feel that you're not sure if that sidewalk would make sense here, then you could always recommend that you possibly do a fee in lieu of that so that you could figure out some better connection in the area that might benefit the public.
What if they came here with a request to build on the existing 4-acre lot as opposed to subdividing? Would that change?
If they just came in with one house, there would be no sidewalk required. But since they are subdividing into two, the sidewalk is required.
Under section 178-36, applicants shall be required to construct or pay for the construction of, at the option of the township, certain on or off-site improvements or portions thereof which the township determines bear a rational nexus to the need created by and the benefits conferred upon the subdivision on development. So it's really a discussion item for the board to, if the fee in lieu of is chosen, that is something that can be taken care of either now or at the building permit stage. If it's a sidewalk that is chosen, that also could be noted on the plan at the time of building permit, and as a restriction, that at the time of building permit, the applicant for such shall be required to construct sidewalk along its fair share of road frontage or pay a fee in lieu of.
I generally like to see sidewalks, but this is sort of the sidewalk to nowhere almost. So it'd be a little stub coming on a Sandy Run Road. But it would connect these two homes with the bike trail on Edgewood. So at a minimum, I think there should be a fee in lieu of. I don't feel strongly that it should be a sidewalk. I could go either way on this one.
So, Tony, I would defer. The decision is really predicated on the sight lines there coming down Edgewood Road to turn right onto Sandy Run aren't fantastic, especially given the wooded coverage of the road, right? So I can see a safety benefit to those two homes having a sidewalk to connect to the bike path to keep pedestrians out of the street. Should those pedestrians be walking or riding their bikes to get access to the pool, to the Kiola fields, et cetera, that's all located there. So I would put that note down for the town's engineers and for Mr. Majewski to weigh in, but I do think it is more appropriate to defer that question to the BOS than to us.
And I think that in terms of safety, I mean, I'm not sure is safe on the line tonight or?
No.
Okay. As Mr. Coyle noted, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, having sidewalk is safer if you're out of the roadway. I think that would be a good thing in terms of life safety as well.
Especially given that the traffic from Sandy Run can only turn right. Drivers making a right turn onto Sandy Run Road may not feel they have to exhibit as much care to be aware of a vehicle coming out and turning left into there. You know, it's just, at the very least, to be honest, I would prefer the requirement be on the plans and it would be recorded as a requirement for those subdivided lots. And if at the time of construction, this board is constituted differently, the Board of Supervisors is constituted differently, our stormwater ordinances, our impervious services have evolved at the time of the contemplated construction, I'd rather have an argument to remove the requirement than for us to be trying to convince someone to put that requirement back in.
I tend to agree with you, Colin.
There's also utility poles along that side of the roadway. So for the addition of two homes to relocate utility poles for the way of sidewalk is quite a burden to the sidewalk that leads to nowhere, as you indicated, and will not ever likely be extended because the rest of the road has developed lots, unless the township were soliciting grant monies to extend sidewalk beyond. So
I don't mean to be contentious, but there is a request to subdivide the land, right? There's no burden today to build a single home on the property, and to move forward with no sidewalk being required. And I would leave it to the future, you know, in number 31, we reference a homeowner in the text of the red response rather than the clients or the current owners. So it's clear that we're contemplating a future undetermined homeowner who may be buying this land from one of the two clients. I think it's appropriate for them to consider that burden when considering their design plans.
Just a quick question on the proposed bike path easement. Is it anticipated that the bike path would be adjacent to the sidewalk, or would, I only ask this because I live on a corner property that put in a bike path and they took out my sidewalk and put in the bike path, which we were fine with. Is that what's contemplated for the bike path?
The bike path is existing.
I'm sorry?
The bike path is existing. There's a current bike path on Edgewood Road that crosses Sandy Run.
Okay. Okay, that was my question then.
yeah, the township had to put that in some time ago.
Can I take a real quick look at that?
Yeah, I have the bike path on
Yeah,
our
I just
plan.
wanna see.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. So this is the bike path, right? That's the revision to the intersection that we just did. And your properties are what, here? And the question is, yeah, the sidewalks would go here. You wouldn't have anything to do here. That's all bike path. So it would be the frontage that's on Sandy Run Road. And the argument for that could be that there's other houses on Sandy Run that eventually could be connected, or just for those two people. But leaving it at the Board of Supervisors at that time to determine whether they think fee in lieu or sidewalks is better is probably the best choice. Because I can't speak for the other four members of the Board of Supervisors. Those who know me know I'm pretty militant on sidewalks and bike paths, but this one is not necessarily a slam dunk. So the board may view that in light of, okay, it's two homes. And presumably, you could walk on the grass of the other one if they were neighbors and they were polite, it wouldn't be as big a deal, right? But if they said, okay, we want to link the rest of Sandy Run up, that would be really cool. We have been applying for grants in areas and building out bike paths. This wouldn't be in the top 5 for that, just based on my understanding of where we're at.
Understood. Thank you. Leading us to number 30, which is the tree protection standards, which the comment is asking for a description of the protections that will be given to the remaining existing trees. Again, is that something you were hoping would be deferred to the building permit, since we don't know what trees are going to be removed?
I wrote in the response, since the precise limits of disturbance are unknown, we believe this matter is best suited to be noted on the record plan of subdivision to be a requirement to be filled by the applicant for a building permit. This is particularly true since the timing for the building permit application could be 1, 2, 5, 10 or more years from now, and tree sizes will have changed.
It's a common theme of the issues we're running into. Since it's conceptual, we provide the information, but it may be irrelevant because the houses are going to be, it could be years from now, different trees there, or the houses are going to be a different size or a different location. It's almost like we were talking a little bit before the meeting. By putting the buildings in conceptually to give you an idea that it could fit, it's now causing more requirements as if we didn't provide them at all. So we're looking, I guess, to give you the most accurate information and to provide that information now, and then they're built 5 years from now. It's kind of, at that point, relevant.
And just the requirement, this is part of the saldo as well, so this wouldn't apply later. That's why we want to comment now, make sure it carries through to building permit.
I think this would, Ms. Kirk, would be one of those issues we would put in the declaration.
Looks like a lot of the notes are going to be part of a declaration of restrictions. Assuming it's approved by the Board of Supervisors, but I think that's the easiest way to capture all of these items that are being deferred until the time of building, if that's the way it goes, so that there's information on the part of any property owner at the time of construction.
Understood. And I think we would be having the same conversation for numbers 35, 36, and 37. It's just different requirements, but the same request. One is the listing of the exact impervious surface numbers. That's 35. 36 is providing for the conceptual stormwater conveyance system. And then 37 is providing details for the grading and stormwater management on the site.
And again, that's for the benefit as well for the applicant, that this will work and you won't want to shift a lot line by 1 foot that you wish we kind of did before. So again, just proving that's a viable lot, that it meets all the site capacity calcs, resources, zoning, with all the disturbance you would have to do to fit in a home of a size that would be most likely, proposed. Of course, it's going to change, but, for the kind of scale that would be appropriate, and just show that it would be compliant and not require any variances with the disturbance that you would propose.
Mr. Sacco, because there's no clear time frame as to when these houses will be developed, and they're not going to be anything in the immediate future. Obviously, it would be subject to the regulations in existence at the time of the development or construction.
Understood. I see on your agenda this evening, you've got a stormwater management ordinance that you might be considering, so that's understood.
And if I may, there's two additional comments that we'd like to add in reviewing the other letters that were submitted. The first comment is the PA DEP sewage facilities planning module application mailer for the subdivision. So that's one comment we will be adding on the next go. The second comment actually comes from the Environmental Advisory Council. Their comment was more or less that the applicant should provide a landscape buffer. They mentioned evergreens, but we'll note that a buffer that screens the two lots year-round from the adjacent train tracks. They discussed the amount of trains that come through. So we would say that it should be provided for these two lots.
Was an item in your review letter. What number is that?
31.
These are two additional that we'd be adding after we submitted our letter, and then once all the letters were passed out, these are comments that we saw. I think the first one was from the Bucks County Planning Commission, and like I said, the second was from the Environmental Advisory Council. I believe Supervisor Grenier may have made the comment. It's part of the letter.
Paul,
You do have it in your letter, though, 31.
you made that comment in comment number 30 on provide a vegetative buffer at the rear of the lots to help minimize the effects of the SEPTA CSX traffic.
Okay. I hadn't noticed that.
You're ahead of the game.
Perfect.
For what it's worth here, I agree with the applicant that it's not really a matter of whether or not we permit the subdivision. It's really you're going to buy a house that backs onto a train track. You may want some trees to buffer the noise.
Well, my response to that was, it's not really an ordinance-driven matter, but I certainly understand it. And I felt I usually address these by a disclosure statement for a future homeowner to execute, knowing they're aware of what they just bought and the proximity of their home to such a thing as railroad tracks. And to put evergreen trees up, to knock down existing trees, to make room to put up evergreen trees didn't really compute to me too well. And quite frankly, if I was a homeowner, I'd be probably considering a board-on-board fence if I really wanted to curtail the noise. So I think it's a homeowner issue. I think as long as they're aware of it, I think whether they want to, but I wouldn't want them to cut down trees to put up new trees. But I think a fence could squeeze in between trees.
One item to note is that is a quiet zone intersection for the trains, which is probably part of the reason why it's a lot more appealing lot than it would have been, say, 5 years ago, pre-quiet zone, where you would hear a number of train whistles. Now, there is no guarantee that it will always be quiet. So the future homeowners need to know that, depending on CSX or SEPTA standards at certain times, they will blow horns. Right.
Right.
And those folks, trust me when I tell you that they calculate the time and duration of horns over the course of a period and want us to advocate with CSX. That's the Federal Railroad Administration. We don't have a lot of pull with them. So these are things you may want to consider when selling the property to potential homeowners. The noise, I don't even know what the noise of the train is, but it's probably sub 50 dB or something like that, but still annoying. But the horn is real. And there will, it's not always going to be quiet, I guess is the thing. So that's something, while it is a quiet zone and it was a lot of work for the township over a long period of time, there's no guarantee it stays that way.
It had a similar case with the subdivision up against a pig farm. And a disclosure statement on, because it needed to make sure that they were aware of what they were buying next.
And if I could just clarify one thing, the designer mentioned that they wouldn't want to remove trees to put up, say, evergreens, or I was thinking more green giants, but ideally we would look for positions and places where you would be adding trees and not to tear down. That would be the goal, to provide that buffer, not to remove trees, just add.
Well, that's what I felt, that a fence would be better, because if you have any gaps between them, it doesn't do anything on noise. So that's my opinion.
The only other
May I
question-
ask two questions of Barbara?
Well, let me, before you do, hold that
Yep.
thought.
Great.
There was a traffic engineer review letter of February 15th, 2024, and it appears that items 1 and 3 may still be at issue.
They were
Is there-
covered, they were included in the township engineer's letter, and
They were?
about site distances.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe item 33.
And there's, yeah, the site distance for each
Right.
driveway,
Yeah, he said it was item satisfied.
and then the plan regarding the driveway design.
Yeah, we already had the driveway widths and radii dimension
That's
on the
fine.
prior plan as well. The important one is the fee, which township engineer has in his letter too, about the impact fee. Yes.
Mhm.
Right, Barbara, and I think the safe engineer review letter was prior to the revised plan.
Okay,
That maybe.
But we didn't change any of it. It was already, I think he just missed it, the driveway width and radii.
So it's already been addressed.
Been addressed.
Okay.
Have complied.
Yeah, I did say that will comply, so I hope I didn't speak.
all right, Mr. Coyle, I'm sorry.
No, it's wonderful. So, there's a number of points here where Remington Vernick has put a note about proving that it's a viable subdivision. Are we actually required in any way to do that, to prove that beyond, you've proposed that you could put a structure here? Is there any real requirement to say we're certain that you'll be able to put enough stormwater management on here to eventually construct a home?
I'm not aware of that. So technically, they can subdivide the property if they so desire. That's permitted under the MPC. There's no requirement at this stage, as to the best of my knowledge, that somebody has to prove that you can construct a dwelling on those lots.
Right.
At the time of construction, if it doesn't comply with zoning regulations and things of that nature, then they either build a really small house, or they design it in such a way that it complies, or they get zoning relief.
Be a nice spot for a hammock.
Mhm.
The other question I had in regards to the sample homes that are illustrative on the plans, having those in this record as we move forward, does that in any way kind of guide or bind future commission or board decisions around the property? Are we essentially saying we have reviewed a proposed, whatever it is, 2,500 square foot home and indicated an approval? Or is it solely illustrative and there's no positioning that it's kind of precedent setting?
The record clearly states that they were placed on the plan simply to show
Okay.
the dimensions for the subdivision requirements. So I would say that there is nothing to be construed as a affirmative or a placid type of approval of the proposed homes.
And we have a pretty bold note on sheet 2 on that concept plan that states the concept grading plan with schematic sanitary sewer laterals and water services and the demolition plans shown above are provided solely as a means to support the viability of the subdivision application without land development.
Perfect.
And I mean, we could also make it a requirement of the declaration of restrictions that any proposed schematics were merely for illustration purposes and nothing else.
Agreed.
I'm glad you pointed that out on page 2. I was looking for it on page 1. I was going to suggest a note similar to that. So, thank you.
Welcome.
Anybody else have any comments? Jim or Paul, I think one of you had mentioned the Bucks County review letter. I don't think I actually saw that. Apart from the PADEP sewage plan.
I think we had page 2 is what I took it as, BCPC number 12919. It was after the fire marshal letter. We
Yeah,
had page.
Yeah, Bucks County Planning Commission, and every subdivision really needs to have a DEP endorsement of sorts. In this case, we will file for a planning module exemption, but for really 0 EDUs, because that aspect isn't what's being proposed. And I've done that in the past, and we get their acknowledgement that there's no building being proposed at this time, but it's a formality that subdivision approval needs to file a planning module of some sort. In this case, it would be an exemption.
So if you're not asking for additional EDUs, since you're creating another lot, how would they account for having that additional EDU with that new lot if you don't list that on the mailer?
It's what we've done before. We did it with the municipality, who actually the municipality proposed the subdivision, received a DEP response for 0 EDUs. It was deferred, and at the time of building permit application for those, and they all went in at the same time, they had to file it then.
So if you had the building permit, you would show the EDU?
Yes.
Okay.
And perhaps that should be a note in the plan that each individual lot will be required to get a sewage facilities planning module approval.
Great.
And again, just one word of thought, and sometimes there's moratoriums, but I've always in the past when I was designing, issued for it now, but again, that's up to you and if deferred, but just trying to make it work well for the applicant. But
I'll discuss it with them if it means they do not have to pay for the EDUs with the sewer authority, then that may impact their decision.
Just so you understand, there's no more township sewer authority.
I-
It's- Okay.
I know I did a lot of the surveying for the lower Makefield sewer lines to make that conveyance happen. I was disappointed that this sewer easement we found on this property wasn't monumented, so it's monumented now on this plan.
Okay, so again, are there any other questions, comments about what we've heard so far? Someone want to make a motion?
Tony, can I review just some notes on the motion to
I'm
Just-
sorry, what's that?
I'd like to just review a couple, because we've talked through a lot of edits and I just want to make sure we memorialize them in the motion.
Got it. Yep.
Or if it's easier for you, Mr. Coyle, I can provide the verbal motion if it makes it easier.
I think I have one. I just want to double check that we're all agreed on these adjustments. If that's okay.
Yep, go ahead.
So I believe that we are striking number 17 or excusing the requirement of number 17 from the review letter the area of seepage bed BMPs. This is to prove that it's a viable subdivision, and I think we're in agreement with the applicant that it's not appropriate to hold to that requirement. The same with number 18, infiltration testing for the proposed seepage bed. That's really on whoever eventually ends up building to do that. Number 13, tree protection standards. I think we're in agreement. While we love tree protection standards, there's no way to properly assign those to this particular property without a building plan being contemplated. Number 31, the vegetative buffer that was recommended by the EAC, with the exception that there will be a disclosure statement related to the proximity to the tracks. And number 37, the conceptual basins, is just another item that it's probably not appropriate for the subdivision request. Does that all make sense?
I think it does. We did say, just to clarify, 8 and 9 were essentially will complies. Okay.
I believe it was will comply subject to township engineer's approval of the revised or revisions to the plan.
Okay. Will comply subject to the township engineer's approval of the revised plan.
But I
And then
was-
there was one item that was going to be memorialized, the covenant or restriction on the deed. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe items 20, items 13, 17, 18. I was under the impression that 27, 28, 30, 35, 36, and 37 were all going to be notes on the final record plan and subject to the declaration of restrictions, along with the requirement for the Pennsylvania DEP sewer facilities mailer.
I think we're back to Barbara needing to craft this thing because it's getting pretty complicated.
And I think 13 was not one of the ones with the declaration of covenants. I think it was 17,
Okay,
18, 30.
I thought 13 was being deferred because of the seepage bed for the time of impervious surface coverage.
That was 18, I believe, 17 and 18.
That's it. Yeah, 17 and 18.
Oh, okay. So this is what I was going to suggest, Mr. Coyle, that if it were this commission's recommendation, that they would motion to recommend approval of the proposed subdivision plan, subject to compliance with the recommendations in the second review letter issued by the township engineer dated March 7th, 2024, as well as any revisions to the plan that were submitted since that review letter to also be approved by the township engineer, to comply with the recommendations, if not already, of the township traffic engineer's second review letter dated February 15th, 2024, and subject to the recommendations of the EAC set forth in its memo of December 15th, 2023, with the understanding that any items itemized by the applicant to be deferred to the time of building, specifically items 17, 18, 27, 28, 30, 35, 36, and 37, as well as the mailer to the DEP for the sewage planning facilities, be included as notes in the final record plan as well as part of a declaration of restrictions to be signed and recorded against each new lot. And the request for grant of waivers as to proposed grading at 3-to-1 slopes, the maximum driveway slope of 10%, in addition to the waiver of shoulder in lieu of curbing per the review letter number 27, as well as the discussion of sidewalks with payment in lieu of under number 28 be deferred to the Board of Supervisors' consideration.
And
So
Barbara-
moved.
Is there a second?
Guess I'll second that.
Okay. Any,
Whoever I trust.
any discussion, further discussion? Is there any public comment? Anybody waiting for public comment remotely? No. We'll call Barbara's question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes. Thank you. And thank you, Barbara.
Thank you for working through that. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
A week from Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll talk.
No problem.
Discussions.
Yeah, if you'd like to defer to another date, we can do a
Yeah.
extension.
Thanks. Good night. Next item on our agenda is a further discussion or continued discussion of the model sustainable and renewable energy ordinance that the town received from Bucks County. I guess at our last meeting, we had kicked off the discussion, had a good conversation. Think we're supposed to look at things a little further. Jim?
Yeah, I have some like follow-up
Okay, good.
on comments in light of some of the concerns that were
Excellent.
raised. So one of the things that was requested was the number of solar permits in the past year. There's been roughly 29 that I looked at OpenGov. There was the concern about if there would be some preemption for the UCC, which is the building code of the township adopted for the permit. I spoke with our BCO, and he said there's really no glaring issues, and it kind of references which building code it must abide by in the ordinance. And then I also have the UCC.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's the Uniform Construction Code, and BCO is Building Code Official.
And then I can share something on the screen, which kind of gives more info. Okay, so this shows an example of some of the wordage that neighboring township, Northampton Township used. Sorry. So some of the things that Northampton did, I got this from the American Planning Association. They kind of highlighted it out, was from this model ordinance, they kind of took parts of it. They didn't take it in its whole. They established provisions for the design, permitting, construction, and operation of alternative emerging energy facilities. It defined alternative energy and some of the other definitions in the ordinance. And then it made uses permitted by right if they are located within a lot with a permitted use. It also talks about setbacks and lot requirements. And then the last line is kind of relevant to the UCC thing I was discussing. It says, solar energy systems shall be located, designed, and installed as per the manufacturer's specifications, as well as all zoning, building code, and utility requirements. So it would need to meet the requirements for getting a building permit. I also thought this was interesting. In 2021, about 55% of municipalities in Bucks County have some kind of alternative energy ordinance on the books. So I'm assuming that number's only kind of grown since that was 3 years ago. And then this kind of sums it up, the goal of the ordinance. Yeah.
Bless you.
And I got this from a presentation done by the Bucks County Planning Commission, just to give credit for the slide.
Thanks, Dan. When you mention other municipalities with ordinances like this, are they for new developments or redevelopment or both?
Both.
Because I think when Colin had brought up in our last meeting how, at least in Lower Makefield, to a large degree, this type of thing would have more applicability to redevelopment than development. So I completely agree with what Colin said about that at the last meeting, and think that, if there are things in here that Lower Makefield's interested in, it should look at that and try and be as flexible as possible, not knowing what's right around the corner. Just one example, and I haven't seen it anywhere in Bucks County or actually in Pennsylvania, but in, central New York, I've seen in a lot of, not in a lot, in some municipal parking lots and in private parking lots, basically solar panels that are for EV charging. I actually made a pic, this is a picture I took, I just brought. This was like a month ago I saw this, so it's like, they're big. And they're not actually all that expensive to install. Beautiful. And I've seen them in both public lots and private lots. It's the kind of thing that, I could easily see it being installed here in some of our shopping centers. But we need flexibility for these kinds of things if and when they are presented to the town. I don't know what somebody would do right now. I mean, I think installation of these really depends on how close are you to the wires, to put them in. If you're close, I understand they only cost $2,000 to $5,000. If you're not so close, it's a lot more money. But I think we need flexibility. That's my only thought about it.
Yeah.
When you say close, it's because it needs some type of backup.
Well, that gets hardwired into the grid.
Okay, it's not just supplying that one.
Yeah.
So it could backfeed into the grid
Yeah.
when not used.
Yep.
Yeah, I really like the way this looks, and definitely goes with the current trends of infrastructure and parking lots with some of the stuff we see going in at Prickett with the EV chargers.
And who knows, maybe this kind of thing will never take off, but at least it's in some communities already.
Sure.
Yeah, I have heard that it is a bit expensive when you look at the long-term cost. You have that upfront cost, which isn't too bad. I've heard some things from solar people that sometimes the maintenance gets a little costly, but I like the flexibility being provided because currently our ordinance doesn't really address much at all, and that's one of the problems.
Yeah.
Can I ask, why would we want, we could do, solar farms, right? Why would we want these things popping up all over the place? I think once you get a handful of them, it starts to look awful versus being in a location.
Well, I think that's a good question. And sometimes people think solar farms.
If you're tying
Are
into
the-
a grid, then it doesn't really matter exactly where it is. And to put it in, like, for instance, think about it, in some of our parking lots. I think this would look out of place to a certain extent. Think about where, I don't know, McCaffrey's or something, I'm not sure it would, I just think all in one place condensed is probably a better place for this type of stuff. So if it's all going into the grid.
Yeah, I have seen ones where they've had something similar to this, only a long canopy encompassing a number of parking spots. So
Yes.
like a whole row of parking, let's say our pool parking lot, just, it covers the cars somewhat, provides shade and provides solar.
There's a parking lot at Citizens Bank Park in South Philadelphia that utilizes that well, and I've always liked the design of it, so.
I guess the difference between that and this is this actually can charge cars right underneath while it's sitting underneath.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
difference.
yeah, exactly. I've actually never seen this, so it's interesting.
I mean, some of the things that I do at work is parking decks.
Mhm.
And for a parking deck, it's a winner because you put it on the top of the deck.
Right.
Because what do you have up there? You have a problem with snow, right? Snow goes up there, there's no place to put the snow. At least that way you got a cover and you're generating power. But we're not really a place that has a lot of parking decks, so to speak. But I'd probably rather see an array of them than just sporadically, like you talked about in the sense of
Yeah,
in front of the.
they're more horizontal. Yeah.
But in the grocery store example, you could, when you bring your cart back, there's a canopy over the carts, right? If you extended that out and you did it where the cart, it could be visually very attractive as part of that, and replacing that sort of canopy for cart, putting your stuff back. The question, the one thing I think about this is the infrastructure to be part of the grid and the buyback of power from Pico. We need to think about how power generators can store or transmit their excess power and how we make that easy for people to do, whether it's a commercial developer, an existing residential person. My understanding is that's not too easy right now. And what people are doing in some measures, putting battery backups in their homes, right? Like a power wall for that. Which has benefits in the event there's a power outage, but is not the most efficient use of power generated.
Again, that's the current state of affairs that could change and should change.
Yeah.
So we're looking to see what we can propose that's gonna allow for things in the future.
I'm wondering though, could the Bucks County Planning Commission help us map out all those endpoints or where it'd be easy to tie into the grid and where you could send power back and how to do that? That'd be kind of a question for them, which is how do we make alternative energy easier for people to implement and get back into the grid and get their payment?
That sounds like the kind of thing that would be helpful for coming up with an ordinance.
Yeah.
The talk of solar carport canopies. I've seen them, a number of hotels, throughout the area and throughout the country have them. So, even in New Jersey, there's enough sunlight to make them worthwhile. To the point of the pool, I can absolutely see a predicted future where we want to modernize our township infrastructure and go for LEED certified township building. If that ever happens, having that structure available. So my only thing there would be that I'd like to do, Dan, I saw that the Northampton provision that you had there or up this page said that the structure shall be no taller than 15 feet, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. I just scrolled back to it, so you can
Yeah.
probably.
Freestanding alternative energy system should be liquidity. Maybe that wouldn't apply to something like a solar carport, which would provide shade for everyone's cars in the lot and everything else. I just want to make sure that whatever we do wouldn't preclude us if we then found out later, well, they have to be 16 feet tall, and now we've written our own ordinance that says we can't put in our own energy independence. So I'd just like a hair of research into what those types of facilities look like before we codify any limits.
And perhaps we look at what the height is in a residentially zoned district versus a commercial district where a higher number might make more sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, just wanted to provide some follow-up, and obviously there's no action needed by the board tonight. Sounds like some more legwork will be needed to get done in order to kind of create something more concrete that we can recommend, or that you can recommend.
Oh, that sounds good, and thanks for
Yeah.
providing that input, and look forward to more information.
Great. Thank you.
Our next item is the update to the tree bank ordinance.
I can take this one as well. This was brought to myself, Jim, and David Kratzer. It was brought up from the EAC. They've been doing a lot of good work for trees in the township with the multi-year tree plan, and now they want to kind of update the you'll see in the ordinance. So it's a slight change going from a 3-year to an annual change in the contribution per replacement tree. And Barbara wrote the ordinance, which you have in front of you. It's just I think it's just one couple words that are different, but it's kind of just making sure we're more on top of it and adjusting the adjusting the cost effectively.
Just so the board's aware of the information that is listed in the ordinance as to using the All Urban Consumers Price Index is what the EAC provided to me as being the index. I did see that the Bucks County Planning Commission, however, once suggests that a specific table from the, I guess, index be designated in the ordinance along with months designated to mark the annual change and the specific category used to determine the change. I don't.
Do we index anything else at the township to a inflation index?
Yes, our traffic impact fee is tied to one index. And our park and rec fee in lieu is indexed to another one. One is the engineering news record 20 city building cost index. And that's, I think, October, November of each year. And the same with the other one is the Philadelphia Consumer Price Index of November. So to the Bucks County Planning Commission's point, we should spell out which exact table and index we're using. And I do have that information. I thought I had it with me, but I can't find it right at this moment. But we do have an exact date and table that we use to the point of the Bucks County Planning Commission. And that'd be simple enough to just add that wording in.
Do we have to pay any subscription fees to each of these? You know, do we already pay whatever we need to gain access to the All Urban Consumer Price Index annually? Can we use one of the other two indexes that we're already using is what I'm getting at? Do they have an appropriate table?
Actually,
BLS has the table for CPI. So if you go to bls.gov, you can get the latest numbers and the breakdowns from there. That's a public Bureau of Labor statistics, calculates the CPI every month, and they have different versions of it. CPIU is the urban one that you mentioned, and you were using US or just Philadelphia for that?
I don't
says-
recall.
Oh,
What
sorry.
does it say?
Well, the ordinance says US.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's what we used.
yeah.
And it's the index that's somewhere later in the year because we do our fee schedule in December.
Yep.
So it's either the October index that comes out in November. I think it's probably what it was.
When was the last time that the amount of, for the tree ordinances, the replacement cost was changed?
I believe it was last year.
Okay, so it's been fairly current.
We're fairly current.
Okay. Any further comments about this? Someone want to make a motion?
Make a motion. Prove it, yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Seconded. There's only three of us.
You want the motion to indicate, recommend approval subject to including the revisions as recommended by the Bucks County Planning Commission?
Yes, and to be supplied by Jim.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yep, from the website. Is there any public comment? Sounds like none. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes. The next item on our agenda is proposed stormwater management ordinance amendments. Dan, is it Dan or Jim?
I'll take this one.
Okay.
As you may be aware, the township is looking into updating our stormwater management ordinance to be more in tune with current practices for stormwater. We have two stormwater ordinances because we have two major watersheds, the Delaware River South watershed and then the Neshaminy Creek watershed. And the Neshaminy Creek watershed is in the northwestern part of the township, and the Delaware River South watershed encompasses the remainder of Lower Makefield. The ordinances that are part of our Act 167 Stormwater Management Plan were initially promoted and adopted starting in the early 2000s, around 2003 or 4, and I think they were adopted sometime around 2004, 2005, with a few minor updates over the years. We have looked at our ordinance, and we realize it's going to be sort of a long process, maybe 6 months or more, to get all of what we think we should have in a stormwater ordinance adopted. So in speaking with the consultant that the Board of Supervisors had engaged for this endeavor, we looked at, are there any quick changes that we can make that would be impactful to stormwater? To that end, I had circulated around, or Dan had circulated around the stormwater management ordinances in track changes format. And there are basically a number of minor tweaks to all of the ordinances. For each ordinance, they're basically identical, just different citations of where they fall in the ordinance, but issues such as volume control, design, storm. One of the things we did was they recommended was taking out the simplified method for calculating stormwater, increasing the rainfall data that is done. As everyone's probably aware, we've had more increasing intensities of storms over the last decade. I know when I first started working in Lower Mayfield, I think they used the 7-inch of rainfall over 24 hours was the storm of design for everything. And they increased it to 8.4, but even then, we see that that's probably a little bit adequate. So their recommendation was going with a higher upper confidence level for those storms in order to capture a slightly larger rainfall. A few other items in there are taking away some items where it says recommended and replacing it with a shall, so that applicants aren't just sort of encouraged to do things that we want them to do for stormwater, but they're more mandated. Also, a lot of these things are in line with the upcoming Pennsylvania post-construction stormwater management manual that's currently in the adoption phase by Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. That may be adopted sometime later in the year. Our consultant had actually been working on that, and that's where they came up with many of these recommendations. There are recommendations that most likely will be adopted later in the year by the state. A few other changes were made. Some extra things looking at redevelopment projects and trying to get more consistency between volume and rate requirements in the ordinance, and reducing the total amount of impervious surface by 20% of what you can consider redevelopment. Currently under redevelopment, you can if you have a site that's fully developed and you're redeveloping it, you have to take out part of that site and consider it as if it was grass, but not actually currently paved. And that just sort of retains a little extra water, and they're recommending that that be increased somewhat. And basically, those are the major changes. I put them forth highlighted in red with comments on the sidebar of everything. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to go.
Has Supervisor Grenier already looked over and commented on these?
You will.
Not yet. It's come to the Planning Commission first and is going to the EAC also this week. The state guidelines. Municipalities will be required to meet those minimum standards that are in their ordinance. We're getting a little bit ahead of that, so we're actually, well, I'm been told later this year, but these things sometimes have a way of dragging. And that's one of the reasons why the township felt that it would be good to get something in now to be impactful and not wait another 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year to enact what ultimately we believe will be enacted by the state. No. If there is some significant change that something comes up, then we could always amend our ordinance accordingly. And this is also part of the long-term plan to update our ordinance. And just some of the things we talked about in recommendations, that'll be the ultimate end game rather than these small changes that we do feel will be impactful. But in the future, some of the other items that we're looking at are increasing riparian buffer requirements for new and development sites, increasing the focus on low impact development and green infrastructure. We do have an ordinance that talks about that. A lot of the wording is you should, we recommend that, but I think they're looking into how can you put more of those standards into we'd like to require more of it rather than try to steer you in that direction. And then sort of utilize the volume control design requirements that are upcoming through the Pennsylvania Post-Construction Stormwater Management Ordinance that they will be mandating in the future, adding in more restrictive peak rate requirements. So that basically means when the water is released during a storm, that you release less of it. So it gets released slower over time rather than you get to a certain point and then it all just goes out. And hopefully that will have an impact on flooding. And also formalizing better our stormwater management permits. What's a major permit, what's a minor permit, and what requires what level of effort on the part of a homeowner, a developer, and engineers. And that's kind of the overview, which I should have given.
Jim, it just sounds like a lot of these other changes which are coming are pretty extensive. And so when's the estimated time for those proposed changes?
I believe we had a schedule, but I can't seem to find it right now.
Okay. I mean, basically,
Find it now. But we're talking sometime in the next maybe 4 to 5 months.
okay. That's when it first gets proposed and then it gets kicked around a little bit. So,
I think it'll be proposed sooner than that.
okay.
But it'll have to go, I think they're gonna just do a real brief presentation to the EAC about what some of their thoughts are. And then from there, it'll be coming to the Planning Commission, the EAC, to the Board of Supervisors. And I'm sure there'll be multiple rounds. It won't just be one round.
So, I'm looking at what is proposed before us tonight, and it all looks good. I'm hearing what you're saying. This is all about, reducing flooding. Who could be against that, right? I mean, it's just sort of hard to be against that one, right? But what we're really talking about here is getting this in place with a 4 to 5 month lead time over the additional changes that are going to be coming.
Correct.
Um,
Yeah, in a perfect world, we'd like you guys to say, we love this, or can you change a word or two and then possibly have it recommended for advertisement by the Board of Supervisors.
okay.
That's my dream.
Okay. And I think I heard Colin ask, and I started to hear the answer. You said the EAC hasn't commented on this yet, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm sure they will comment on it. Look, we could make a recommendation before hearing from them, and they can have a separate standalone recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Or we could wait to hear from them.
Their meeting's this Thursday, correct, Jim?
Yes.
This Thursday at 6?
So for timing wise, if the planning commission believes these recommendations should be moved forward, I believe the next board meeting would be next Wednesday.
Correct.
Yeah.
So so you may want to recommend whether to the supervisors to adopt these and allow the EAC to make their own recommendations so it can go in front of the board by next Wednesday for advertisement. If there's the impetus to get this moving faster rather than later.
Well, I guess the only issue is we just don't know when the EAC would be ready to be in front of the board.
Knowing them, they'll have something written up by Friday.
They've probably already written it and they're just waiting to talk about it.
Well, that would be nice. I don't know that it would make it to next week's agenda because the EAC would have to have signed off on it by Friday. Well, week before. That might be a little bit.
Well, I think they could make, provided they don't have any substantive changes that might make it want to come back to the planning commission to say, hey, the EAC looked at this and they had some other ideas, planning commission, what are your thoughts on those? I'm hopeful that they would recommend approval of this. There might be some minor change. Maybe there's some word in there that they might find objectionable, but I think substantively, I think this is in line with what their goals have been. So I don't see major changes to this coming from them. And if it does, then obviously then it'll come back around.
Well, I think what I could say to both the planning commission and EAC would be that there will be a second bite at the apple because these are the first quick ones to protect us while the longer term stuff comes in. So if we can get that by Friday, that would be helpful. The question I have on this, and I wanted to understand, what was the peak rate calculation for discharge? So, and the reason I asked that question is you mentioned the 24-hour total, which was, you said 8 inches or something like that in 24 hours?
For the 100 year.
8.4 is the current standard.
Right. And we had a situation where parts in a storm burst in upper Makefield hit over 7, in the lower Makefield hit clearly 5.5 within 45 minutes to an hour. And what's our peak discharge rate in that scenario? I know that's probably not one we could meet, but for most development, but what are we calculating on that peak discharge rate for how much water goes out in that scenario?
I'm not 100% sure, but what they've done is they've taken that rainfall amount and raised it up. Right now, the current NOAA rainfall curve that we use, I think they take the average number for what they used to call the 100-year storm.
Mm-hmm.
That's that 8.4 inches over 24 hours, or like over a couple of hours. It's a much lower number, but this is going to take it to the 90% confidence level. So that 8.4 goes up to, I'm not sure the amount. But it increases it. It may not have captured all of the rain that we experienced last July, but it'll get us closer to that. And if every basin had been maybe designed to what we hope will be the new standard, maybe the flooding would have been less extensive.
We can't, and I would be hopeful that that's the case, but it's very hard given where we're at with the temperature, the weather swings that we've gotten. So I don't want to over promise on that, but yeah, ideally we want to be able to get to where we can handle unfortunate peak events like that, which seem to be more and more frequent, unfortunately.
And also timing.
Yeah,
There's a difference between an hour and 45 minutes and a 24-hour period.
yeah.
So, getting 3 inches in an hour could be worse than 7 or 8 inches over a course of 24 hours. And then you have the infrastructure failure issue too, because, you can certainly have drainage. Like for instance, that one pipe that failed at the canal in Yardley, that basically took that guy's backyard out. I mean, that was really the result of whatever pipe that was coming from the street. There was an easement through the backyard. That pipe failed and,
Well, that was more erosion that
Yeah.
eroded, and then the pipe started falling into the erosion, and
what
then
happened, yeah.
and then eventually lost half the pipe.
Yeah.
The pipe itself would have been fine, other than the erosion that
Okay.
collapsed the ground surrounding it.
I would imagine there's a lot of pipes that probably need some work.
Well, that's and part of the reason why you're seeing this first step and then a longer run is I think what happened last year in the Maple Vale community really woke some people up to the issues with stormwater management and revising and being extraordinarily a lot more diligent about this, not just in that immediate area, but throughout the whole township, which is why we're exploring this. And for the record, and for full disclosure, that storm and that impact had a significant impact on the budget of Lower Makefield Township. We spent, I think, close to $1.5 million in response to that, including repairs and stuff. Now, hopefully some of that money may come back over time. But as a consequence, for the 6 people that are watching on Facebook or YouTube, don't be surprised if there's a stormwater management fee that comes associated with when we look at this later in the year, so that we can find revenue sources that will help us make the improvements that we need to make, and also help us with making sure inlets are cleared, giving us the resources that we need to make sure that the stormwater management features that we have work well and under those scenarios, and they're constantly inspected, and we have the resources for that. So that, so I don't want anybody to be surprised. Again, the people that are watching won't be surprised. It's the people that aren't watching will be surprised, but this is likely to come, is what I would suggest on that, in terms of a fee to capture some of the costs associated with that. But, and Jim, I don't want to slow down this first good step. All of the supervisors have had a copy. They got it from Township Manager Kratzer once he got it from the consultants. So they are all reviewing it while we're taking a look at this as well. And, I would say take a review. If you've got comments, we still probably need to dig in on some of the peak issues and some other stuff if you find stuff. But I would say, provide, give us your suggestions.
And the consultant did say that many of these items that they have in here are items that will be in the post-construction stormwater management ordinance or guidelines once it's adopted by the state. So we're jumping the gun a couple of months.
But there's not a lot on the agenda that this is even going to affect, right?
Well, a lot of this actually affects, that 2-lot subdivision.
Yeah,
that we just saw.
I'm saying.
People do a lot here, a lot there. You do a subdivision, which there's more land still available for development. If we adopt it, maybe we can mandate that they go with this new higher standard. If we wait, it could just be a little bit too late, and then They get it under the old requirements and we don't get this enhanced stormwater design that we would like to have.
I mean, that's always my question. How long does waiting for the state to finalize affect us?
Someone could come in with something, next Thursday, and if our board didn't authorize advertisement of an ordinance, they're grandfathered into the old requirements.
And Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't stormwater management ordinance apply to construction that's 1,000 square feet or more? So it could be like somebody wanting to put up a large shed or a detached garage or something of that nature, correct?
Yes, and actually it's for everything, even like a smaller patio.
It's not
We
just
make-
for new development type of thing.
It's not for new development, it's for redevelopment, it's for people putting in swimming pools. When they go to the zoning hearing board, the most common thing is that they want them to manage the stormwater for all the increase in the impervious surface, which is what our ordinance requires. They make it a condition, but sometimes they make them even go back. If your lot was already over what's allowed, and you're adding more, they want you not just to mitigate the stormwater from what you're adding, but to go back a little bit. And this ordinance actually mandates that with that extra little 20% volume to just do a little bit more when you're doing stormwater.
Yeah, I think in the zoning hearing board, we've been accommodating for people's pool requests over the years, so much so we weren't counting the actual space of the pool as impervious surface, under the theory that, it's water, it's gonna collect water, but in fact, it can overtop, and if we do have significant rain, you do have that, and it does act as impervious surface, so it's not collecting and discharging water properly. So I think those are the kinds of things that we want to, push back on.
How precise are we able to monitor this? I mean, they're gonna get an engineer, right? Somebody wants to put a shed up and they have to go out and get an engineer. How precise is the measurement between 20% more than what is current?
Well, there are simplified methods to do small scale impervious surface. We actually have a spreadsheet that's available on our website. You just punch in your lot size, how much your house, your driveway, patios, walkways take up. It'll calculate what your existing impervious surface and then you add in how much you're adding.
No, I'm talking
How
about
much
the
you're
mitigation
subtracting.
for that.
Well, and then how much you're subtracting, and then it tells you what your goal is that you need to meet. And then you could just type in, how are you going to mitigate that? And it's a simplified method that most homeowners can do. We have some people that still need us to do it
All right,
for them.
I'm
You
ignorant.
don't need to hire an
I'm ignorant because
engineer.
I don't know how to mitigate. So what are some of the simple mitigation methods?
For small scale stuff that doesn't require go to the zoning hearing board, planting trees to absorb water, putting in rain barrels for small scale increases, adding in infiltration trenches or seepage beds, like sort of
Okay.
French drains that
Okay.
you tie a roof leader from your addition into that so that the water is stored underground and percolates into the ground prior to running off over land.
I understand.
And Jim, if I could chime in whenever it's convenient, I had done a review and just had some ideas and then some comments as well, so if now is an appropriate time.
As good as any.
All right, very good. Yeah, so first kind of overall idea and just relaying off, Supervisor Lewis mentioned and the planning commission that just a 100-year storm, as we see, we're up to a 1,000-year storm. I'm wondering if there's like a factor that we'd want to, planning commission and board want to consider adding like a 0.1 or 0.2 increase in inches. Like for instance, the code says no partial duration of 90% upper confidence level. So we pulled some NOAA data, and that's what the data shows. You go to the gauge, it lists a 90% confidence interval. And for instance, the one stream gauge, let's see, Morrisville, that 100-year was only 8.06 as opposed to the 8.4 that's in table B1. So the kind of the wording of it to equal to or not less than NOAA partial duration. A couple of gauges I'm looking at here were less than the 8.4. So just to consider, applying some factor like 0.1. So for instance, the 100-year was 8.06 at this one gauge. The 200-year was 9.18. So not to go to the 200, but maybe you tack on a 0.1 or 0.2, above that value. And it just looks like at the gauges that we pulled that it was below the 8.4. So potential, change in the ordinance there in section A. Second idea is just with the kind of the failure we see with rain gardens. I've never seen this before in the code, but I thought it might be a good idea that if you kind of note in the stormwater code that for any infiltration BMP, you specify to have a backup riser and outfall pipe installed with no orifice. So if it's going to infiltrate, you have the infrastructure there. And then basically you can note that the orifice shall be sized and drilled upon the infiltration BMP failing. Just an idea that it's there and you have a backup plan. So you hope it infiltrates, but as we kind of see a lot of these over time, or if they're compacted, they fail. And then it's like, how do we fix it? And to make the riser work and have the outfall. I've never seen that in the code. I thought of it today reviewing it, just an idea. So those are the two main ideas. And then I can pass along comments like they note the 2-year, it doesn't note 24-hour storm. Some other areas, it lists the top of bedrock, seasonal high water table. I would add limiting zone in a couple of places. It notes 6B says appropriate hydraulic conductivity. Typically, I've seen that as infiltration rate as opposed to hydraulic conductivity. And then recommended for design purposes, I would say stormwater, where it says percolation tests are not recommended because percolation tests are used for sanitary. So I'd add stormwater and just adding karst topography in terms of where they talked about a liner.
We don't have karst geology in Lower Makefield. The consultant actually mentioned that too. So it's a common thing. We're fortunate that is about 10 miles north of us, so we don't have to deal with that. And that's limestone geology that if you infiltrate it, it'll eat away the limestone and you get sinkholes. That's Upper Makefield, Solbury.
And then one other place on section 6F, it talked about subsurface basin that utilizes stone bed. I would say utilize an underground basin, which would be a chamber system or stone, since underground you wouldn't want it silting up if it's one of those kind of crate systems. So just to include all kind of underground basins rather than stone bed. And then this is on, let's see, 6F. It talks about from the basin's maximum design storm. I would tack on from the basin's tributary area, maximum design storm. Like I said, just some kind of edits like that I can pass around. And the second to last page, it talks about NOAA Atlas 14 Volume 2, version 2.1. We just pulled it today, and it's Volume 2. They're using version 3 now when you pull a rain gauge. But again, those rain gauges we pulled were less than the 8.4. So, yeah. I can pass this around. I'll digitize it. This was hand marked, make it a little clearer if that helps to see the things that I noticed today.
So Paul, your recommendation on number, so A1, post-development total runoff should not be increased, yada, yada, NOAA partial duration 90%. That's where you had recommend adding a 0.1.
And I would actually stick with we pulled 4. I have 2 rain gauges that were in the area for both. So I had a Delaware River watershed gauge and the Chamonix Creek gauge. And the Delaware River one, which was actually right in Trenton, it was 8.12 inches for the 100-year, whereas the table B1 in the code is 8.4. So if someone pulled the NOAA data, which is what I always used to do in design, it would actually be less than that table. So I would almost say maybe take that out, stick with your table, come up with a number. And again, looking at like the 100-year, it lists at 8.12. The 200, well, in comparison, the 50-year is 7.07. You jump 1 inch to 8.12, going from the 50 to the 100, and you jump another inch going to the 200. So maybe you take your 8.4, I don't know, add 0.1, 0.2, a factor, something like that, just to help with what we saw in Maple Vale. And again, we're dealing with a 1,000-year storm, which would be 12.5 according to this, as opposed to the 8.12 or 8.4. So not to
Is
be
it,
too
is it-
strict, but
is it possible, so the recommendations you just rapid fired off, right? Is it possible for you to kind of, I don't want to put too much work on you, but categorize those as, because I read this as, if we want to do something right now, clear, simple, non-combative changes that'll be in place for a couple of months while we do a bigger review. And to me, they seem sensible. Is it possible for you to categorize your recommendations as small, quick tweaks versus longer term changes, and perhaps provide that as a letter to the EAC in
Sure.
advance of their meeting?
okay.
So Tony, if you felt it was appropriate, we could act on this as a bare bones, best effort to quickly modify some provisions. It seems sensible. There's no reason to hold on us, and the EAC can certainly do a bit more of a thorough pass.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And John, what do you think about that? Yeah, that way we can keep the ball moving forward. And the whole idea here is to get this done.
Yeah.
So it satisfies the goal. And they're not really significant changes. Those are to follow.
Hopefully they won't change.
Right. Right.
Just want to say, Jim, thank you so much. The track changes was a tremendous help. Because we had the final version, but I just focused on the track changes. That made it really easy. So thank you for that.
I have final one and track changes. So it looks very much like when I send something. Final, real final, actual final, revision 2.
It's not final till tomorrow.
I usually put down the date because the final gets confusing.
Okay, with that discussion having taken place, someone want to make a motion?
So, John, you're on it.
Make a motion.
Okay.
To recommend the changes as proposed in the track changes version by Mr. Majewski be recommended to the Board of Supervisors for acceptance as a provisional change to our stormwater management ordinances, et cetera. Yes?
I thought that was Barbara's job, but anyhow. I was getting used to it. I said, "Hey, Barbara will finish it for me."
Is there a second to that? And also, as part of that motion, do we want to include that Paul is going to submit some comments to the EAC as well?
With the recommendation that the EAC evaluate the township's engineer's input.
Yep.
In their own process.
And is there a second to that motion?
Second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment remotely? Got the head shake now. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes. Terrific. So now, is there someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn, sir.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And we're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thinking like it should be 2 hours would be very good. So you get it 4 minutes early. Awesome. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, you could probably call him. Yeah. Yeah. So, oh, yeah, it's a side yard. It's actually not his yard. It's the township property where town took down all the trees that were next to his property. Yeah. Well, there were some dates, but then took down everything else.